possibly approve.
Sorry,
Thanks, thanks, Brian. Possibly approve the July Sustainability Committee meeting minutes. We've got our guest speaker, Mike Rupiper. Mike, and how do you say your last name? Is it Rue Piper?
Rue Piper, yes.
Rue Piper, okay. From CARPC, we'll be talking about green infrastructure and the Black Earth watershed. We will have a conversation discussion around research needs for the new village hall / police building. We will pick up the conversation about the lighting ordinances for Cross Plains, the updated lighting ordinances. We will have a discussion about the possibility of some sustainability grants around composting in particular, I believe. We will have some discussion around the NOMO May briefing that John will be providing to the full village board later this month on August 22nd. And if there's time, we'll get to any other items that we can on our sustainability plan. And then, and I can't see the screen, Brian, if you could scroll down, or I'll just pull up my own agenda. Then we will discuss possibly moving our monthly sustainability meeting to a different night, and then we will wrap up. And like I said, I'm going to be watching the time a little bit more closely than usual tonight to try to move us along. And then we are hopefully going to be wrapped up by about 7:15. So that's the plan. That's the agenda for tonight. And so with that, I'm going to pause to see if there is any public comment. Brian, do you know of any public comment? Is there anybody who I don't see who we are expecting for public comment?
I did not receive any public comment.
Okay, thank you. And then with that, I'm going to turn us over into general business and give us the opportunity for any committee member to provide a report out or an update on something that's not already on the agenda. Steve or John?
I have a very kind of limited update. Last month, I talked about the possibility of adopting the Black Earth Creek from Black Earth or Cross Plains to Black Earth, and getting some different organizations within the community. Those being, the Sustainability Committee, the Boy Scouts, the Lions, the Ice Age Trail, Gateway to the Driftless, and I think the Cross Plains Chamber of Commerce, and to try to gather all those groups together and really just get snags that cause flooding to occur removed, and also to make it more amenable to recreational opportunities. I sent out a really big email last month, and I heard back from Melissa. So thank you, Melissa. And I've had a couple other conversations. The Lions never officially got back to me via email, but at the last meeting, since I'm a member, they put me in charge of the environmental platform that the Lions are trying to enact. It's one of their 5 pillars, and in Cross Plains, they really only do 4 of those pillars, and they put me in charge of that. So I think the Lions said yes. I'm fairly certain the Sustainability Committee has said yes. I believe the Boy Scouts, through a conversation I had with Melissa's husband, said yes. So I'm really just working on a couple other groups. It's in the herding cat stage right now.
Thanks, John. Steve, do you have any updates?
Nothing to note, no.
Okay,
Thank
and
you.
I don't yet. Thanks, Stephen. I don't have anything that's not already on the agenda.
Oh, maybe I should just circle back quick. John, I'm not sure I know which email you're talking. Were you looking for some feedback from us that you did not get or need more of?
No, I believe I actually got feedback from us. I as much feedback as I needed right now. which was, does this fall within the sustainability committee's, purview, which I believe the answer was yes, because going back to how we started, which was flood mitigation and things like that.
Okay, gotcha.
And I
Yep,
believe, and so I believe I got the response back I needed from sustainability for the moment.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just didn't want to leave you hanging. So,
Nope, it's the other groups. You guys rock.
It's those other guys. All right. Thanks, John. Thanks, Steve. Next, I'm going to move us on to the next item of business, which is discussion and possible approval of our July meeting minutes. Does anybody, have folks had the chance to review those? And if so, are you ready? Somebody ready to make a motion to approve?
yes, we're able to review, and Steve will make a motion to approve.
I will
The
second it
July
because I
minutes.
also read them.
Great. Any discussion?
No,
All right. All in favor of approving the July meeting minutes as presented, say aye.
I,
Okay. Any opposed? Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Next, I'm going to move us on to our guest speaker, Mike Rupiper from CARP-C, who can talk about flood mitigation and green infrastructure on the Black Earth watershed. And Mike, I'm hoping that you can do that. We'll probably have more questions once we hear your presentation, because I think we're still at a learning stage and we want to know how much, how we can support and what we can do as a sustainability committee to reduce the threat of flooding in Cross Plains. And so we are all ears as part of our sustainability plan, and we'd love to know how we can support the work that you're already moving on. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about this plan and how we can help.
All right, that sounds great. Thanks. Appreciate you inviting me to come and speak to you tonight or with you. I think I've met everybody here at this point, with probably the exception of Steve Douglas, but I think I've met everybody else. So I do have sort of a brief presentation, and I'll try to keep it short because I know you're on a tight schedule and I'd like to save quite a bit of time for discussion with you on this. But if I can share my screen, I do have some kind of slides and stuff to show. I think you have to enable that.
Okay,
Permission, Brian.
trying to remember how to do this. I'm not a Zoom pro by any means here. Go to new share.
Or at least on our Zoom meetings, at the bottom, there's like a security settings, and you have to change that to allow participants to share screen.
There we go. Okay, it should be okay now, I believe.
And then you have to stop sharing your screen.
Okay. There we go.
Great. Can everybody see that okay?
We got it.
Got it.
Great, awesome. So like I said, I think I've met everybody, but for those I haven't, Mike Rupiper, I'm the Deputy Agency Director and Director of Environmental Resources Planning at the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, or CARP-C. And we've been working for a while now with a number of stakeholders, including the village across Plains, on a green infrastructure plan for the Black Earth Creek watershed. And just wanted to kind of give a little bit of the background and history of it and sort of high level summary. And then, like I said, spend some time kind of discussing with you opportunities for implementation in Cross Plains and get your thoughts about what might be effective ways to implement this in Cross Plains. So our initiative kind of started as a result of a BECWA, Black Earth Creek Watershed Association event in the fall of 2019. was after, I'm sure everybody remembers, the 2018 flooding. Beckwith had put together this event. They wanted to have some conversations about flooding impacts and taking a watershed approach. And we had been talking with different people in the region about using green infrastructure as an approach for flood mitigation at the time. So it just seemed like the timing was ideal and it was a natural fit. And, Bill Chang was the administrator at the time and he was involved in that too. So that's kind of what sort of kicked this thing off. I'd say the concept was really pretty well received by people that were in attendance at that event. And we started talking further with the communities in the watershed and developed this idea for a green infrastructure plan on a watershed-wide basis. Just curious if any of you happen to have actually attended that fall Beckwith event back in 2019.
I did not.
Okay.
Kind of wish I had.
Well, it was a good meeting, but anyway, so it led to this effort, which, the first thing we did then was form a steering committee to help us sort of lead this project, formulate what we wanted to do. So that included the 3 villages in the watershed, as well as the town of Cross Plains, and other watershed groups like Trout Unlimited and the Black Earth Creek Watershed Association, Gateway to the Driftless, Groundswell, Nature Conservancy, and then some local agencies like DNR, Dane County Water Resources and Planning and Emergency Management. And then we were fortunate also to get the Army Corps of Engineers involved. Through their program, we were able to apply for a grant where they actually did a lot of the watershed modeling at no charge for us to help support the plan development. And the other part was we applied for a FEMA and Wisconsin Emergency Management Natural Hazard Mitigation grant to help pay for consulting costs for the project. So the consulting team was basically led by EOR. They're a local consulting firm that does a lot of water resources planning. I think they've worked with the village on different projects before from time to time. And they brought in Sand County Foundation on their team, which was kind of their experiences in agricultural land uses and conservation. So they brought that perspective. And Janet Silbernagel, who is a retired landscape architecture professor from the UW, who now has her own firm. She's also a watershed resident, so she's familiar with the watershed. And Ken Potter, who's a fairly well-known, at least in my circles, professor of hydrology at the UW, again, retired, but that was the consulting team that we ended up hiring for the project. So it took a while to kind of go through the process of getting the FEMA Wisconsin Emergency Management grant and hire the consultant and get that on board. But we basically really kicked the effort off in the spring of last year and went through, up to this point, the whole planning process, really. Stakeholder meetings, we had a number of those in different formats, which I'll talk about a little bit more. Went through and ID'd different flood hazards and flood risk and vulnerability in the watershed. I looked at different green infrastructure strategies and what their benefits would be. The consultants did a lot of modeling associated with that. And then the plan writing process, and this is kind of where we are now. We just this spring submitted the plan to Wisconsin Emergency Management for their review and approval. Just recently responded to the few comments that they had on it. So we're kind of in this stage here now where we expect their final approval of the plan here in August. It'll go to FEMA for sort of final approval, but not really expecting any further comments at that point. And so it's really wrapped up and kind of ready to go and start working on implementation at this point. So Brian included the executive summary in your packets, so it's a good kind of reference to go to. And we have a project website that I can share the link here to in a little bit. But now that we have the Wisconsin Emergency Management approval, we'll be posting the full document of the plan onto the website too, so you can kind of look at things in a little more detail if you're interested. But I don't want to go through all of these sheets in detail, but I do want to highlight a few things. So kind of the plan purpose. One of the reasons why green infrastructure was chosen in the first place was it provides an opportunity to focus on practices that not only provide a quantifiable level of flood protection, but also can provide water quality benefits to Black Earth Creek and the tributaries, and also support, different recreational, economic, and ecological opportunities in the watershed. So it's really that multifaceted benefit approach that, green infrastructure is really key to providing. So that was kind of the reason for the focus for that. And, for those you guys probably already know, being sustainability people, but basically when we talk about green infrastructure, at least from a stormwater and flood control standpoint, we're talking about nature-based approaches that use soil and vegetation essentially to retain and infiltrate water closer to where it falls before it has a chance to go downstream and cause flooding problems and water quality problems. So being a watershed-wide plan, we looked at, practices in the valley bottoms and farmland and urban areas, really comprehensive approach to things. I mentioned the public engagement. There was pretty extensive public engagement as part of developing the plan. We tried to reach out to the rural farm landowners, tried to reach out to the urban residents. Because of COVID, a lot of our events were forced to be kind of virtual webinars, but that was also a good way for people to participate. We did have a couple of in-person events, tabling at some community festivals and things like that in the watershed. And then of course, there's some specific practices. This isn't meant to be a comprehensive list, but these were some that were focused on for urban areas, which would be mostly what you'd be looking at in the village across plains, green infrastructure practices like porous pavement, infiltration through rain gardens or bioretention, simple things like disconnecting downspouts and rainwater harvesting. Also, increasing tree canopy and stormwater trees. That's another big one. It's not on this list here. And then also there are some opportunities for wetland restoration and floodplain restoration. And obviously in Cross Plains, you're also affected by what happens upstream, especially in the Brewery Creek watershed and what's going on in the farmland up there. So the consultants kind of did detailed analysis looking at the benefits of green infrastructure in the urban areas and some of the practices we talked about. That's all detailed in the plan. Excuse me. The same for the agricultural practices. And then we also kind of created this vision for the watershed as a whole. There's great opportunities along here through the Black Earth Creek watershed for connecting these practices along the stream, where you have multiple restorations, floodplains, ideally connected with the trail system. That's the concept of Great Way to the Driftless. Xander Park in Cross Plains is actually, you guys have a great example there of what can be done on a watershed-wide basis with the trail and some of the stream re-meandering and floodplain recreation that was done as part of that project, as well as some examples of the green infrastructure with the porous pavement in the parking lots and sidewalks there, by retention in some of the parking lots. So it's a great example, a showcase to kind of show people, at least partially, what the concept of this could be when taken on a broader, watershed-wide basis. Then putting the plan into action, we also kind of identified we felt, the steering committee felt they needed to wanted to have some goal setting. So 5-year goals were established to treat basically 2% of impervious cover each year to mitigate up to 10% of the currently untreated impervious surface within 5 years. So looking at increasing cropland soil health practices by 25% per year, approximately 3,000 acres in 5 years. And then some of the trail connections and the restoration of floodplains and green infrastructure, wetland restoration in the valley bottom areas. So a lot of different potential funding sources depending on the types of practices we're looking at. So for some, it could be funding through FEMA. by doing this as a FEMA funded plan, it helps set this up for funding for FEMA for some of these improvements through their Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program. EDA and NRCS also have programs that will help fund some of these practices, as well as more locally at the state level, DATCAP and DNR. Even Dane County has some grant programs that they use for land acquisition for flood mitigation, as well as urban stormwater practices and retrofits. So there is quite a bit of opportunity for funding, and I think having a plan like this in place really helps sort of establish what those things are. So kind of transitioning here, I wanted to start talking about, what are the opportunities for the village of Cross Plains related to the green infrastructure plan. One is we'll be reaching out to all the communities now, both the villages and the towns, requesting a formal adoption of the green infrastructure plan. I think obviously it goes a long way to help with plan implementation if the communities that participated in the creation of it now formally adopt it as part of their own plans. Shows a kind of commitment to do it. Also, I think there's an opportunity to, I'm sure as a sustainability committee, you've talked about viewing things through a sustainability lens. We can also say there's a green infrastructure lens. There's an opportunity to view, each future project that comes through the village, whether it be for a new development or road reconstruction, anything really can be viewed through the lens of what can we do, with green infrastructure as part of this project to help reduce the amount of runoff and increase the amount of stormwater that's infiltrated into the ground, as well as provide some of the other benefits that we talked about. And then finally, there are a few implementation measures identified in the plan that would be more specific to Cross Plains. So Brewery Creek, I know just upstream of P on Brewery Creek, I think the village purchased some property there as part of that recent development project. So that was an opportunity that was specifically identified in the plan. I think a consultant was hired at one point that looked at this area that, looked at a number of alternatives, but one of them at least was a more of a green infrastructure approach with like floodplain restoration and remeandering that would really fits in, I think, nicely with the green infrastructure plan and the concepts in that plan. So that would be something that could be pursued if there's interest in the village. And also Glacier's Edge Shopping Center, that was identified as a potential area for green infrastructure, either on that property if there's a willing landowners or property owners, or downstream of that before it reaches Black Earth Creek. That's an older development that was created before our current stormwater standards. So there's a lot of opportunities there for implementation of green infrastructure practices. I think that was something that the consultant modeled as part of their urban green infrastructure analysis. So those are kind of the highlights, but I really want to spend more time, getting your thoughts about, what do you see as opportunities for green infrastructure in Cross Plains? What are ways you'd like to see CARPC and the other stakeholders that have helped develop this plan help with implementation, and what other ideas might you have regarding green infrastructure as it relates to Cross Plains?
Mike, this is great. Thank you so much for your presentation. We've got about 10 minutes for questions and discussion around this, and then we can, Mike, would you be willing to share your presentation with us as well?
Sure.
I know we've got the executive summary, but
Yep.
You had some slides, I think, that maybe weren't all in the executive summary that we saw in the packet.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Let's see, John, I see that you are unmuted.
I am. I unmuted, and then I was about to remute because I realized I hadn't completely formulated what I wanted to ask yet. So, now give me a second.
In the meantime, let's let Steve have a chance, because Steve, I can see that you're unmuted.
I did. I went for it. Mike, thanks so much for coming, and really appreciate the background on that. It's what a great project. And I just want to comment on the PDFs, the graphics that I think you said your consultant group put together, sort of the high level. Those are so nice, easily digestible, which I think we always struggle when we're getting our message across. And so really nice materials there too. One question I had about engaging the sort of the locals. How do the farmers feel about this? Have you gotten some good engagement from the farmers along the corridor here? I noticed there's lots of references to no-till. I've personally not seen much of that happening yet, and do understand the concept and how important that can be. How did it go with that particular demographic?
Yeah, I would say, it was, to be honest, kind of mixed results. The first farmer meeting we had was not very well attended. But I guess I would also say what we lacked in quantity, we made up for quality of input. It was really good to kind of hear things from their perspective. And that was the advantage of bringing, Sand County Foundation into the project, is got kind of their expertise of reaching out to farmers. And they held one session where they brought in an out of the watershed farmer that was involved in another like farmer-led watershed group. So you might be familiar with, Yahara Pride. That's a Yahara River-based farmer-led watershed group. Sugar River has one too. It's something that's kind of gaining in popularity around the state, and it was probably one of the most exciting outcomes from the farmer side of things. Is there was a lot of interest at that particular meeting in the farmers forming a farmer-led watershed group to help share best practices and things like that. So I think there's some real opportunities here. As always, there's kind of sometimes a mix, and not everybody feels the same way about it. Not everybody's on board with it, but I think, once you get some early adopters and some leaders to kind of demonstrate some of these things, it can go a long way to enacting change in the watershed.
Thank you.
Thanks for the comments on the visual executive summary. That was exactly kind of what we were going for there, is, a more visual approach that people could kind of more easily digest. So I appreciate that feedback. Yeah,
super engaging. And we have some, don't we have in Xander Park a couple graphic kind of like kiosk sort of things? We have a couple really nice ones. And I mean, this could even be a nice addition, a slimmed down version of those. It's
that
educational.
Becqua put those throughout the watershed. I think there's a couple in Cross Plains, and there's actually one on green infrastructure. I can't remember which part of the watershed it's in, if it's in Xander Park or a different area. But yeah, and we've also been talking with Becqua about applying for a DNR grant to do like a educational video that could be shown on green infrastructure with a focus on Black Earth Creek watershed. It's kind of one way of helping implement and moving forward some of these ideas in the green infrastructure plan.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Mike. John?
So Steve did a very nice job of actually articulating the question that I was trying to ask, which was, because I every time I think about it, I think, I look in Cross Plains and I go, that's a fairly free flowing creek. And then I get down past Black Earth to Mazo and I go, oh my goodness, somebody's taking care of this, and it's a fairly free flowing creek. And the one time my wife tried to go between Cross Plains and Black Earth, her takeaway was, that's not a very free flowing creek. And so my question is, not only the way Steve phrased it as how are the farmers, how accepting are they, how open are they, but a further question would be, does it make sense to have, no, actually, that's not even the right question. How does a sustainability group or a Lions Club or something like that get involved in this to help move this forward?
I mean, my opinion, I guess, you know, it's up to you guys, obviously, how you want to assist with this, but, you know, helping move or recommend the plan for formal adoption through the village board process. That would be great. Advocating for these practices, you know, just talking about green infrastructure when you have the opportunities to do so. Those kind of things, I think, would all be ways that you could really help move this forward. And, you know, I think if we can get a couple of sort of key projects off the ground and raise the visibility of this and show that, you know, we're moving this from a plan to some actual projects on the ground and implementation, you know, the hope is that that just kind of keeps building momentum to the point where it becomes sort of the norm to do green infrastructure.
Okay, and then kind of a follow-up. Whenever I think of, say, the words Department of Natural Resources, I get kind of tense. And so I'm wondering, you know, what is their, I'm not even sure this is the right way to say it, but it's the way I would think of it. What is their oversight of the creek, and what is their authority overall to the project?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the particular aspect, you know. On our steering committee, we had representatives from the fisheries, so Dan Oley, so obviously his primary concern is the, you know, health of the stream from a trout habitat standpoint and a fishery standpoint. And then we also had people from the floodplain program who were, you know, more of the technical experts looking at the modeling and some of those kind of things. So, I mean, DNR is a really broad, wide-reaching agency, and they have a lot of different interests. But, you know, with Black Earth Creek being the renowned trout stream that it is, you know, the trout habitat and making sure that that is, you know, preserved and restored where possible is a high priority for them, obviously.
Mike, thank you so much. I'm going to actually wrap us up here because we still have a lot more to cover, but I can say that this project, Bill Chang working with CARPC and others to create this plan, is what led to items 3 and 4 on our sustainability plan. Number 3 being establishing a water retainage project on 14 acres on Brewery Creek, and number 4 being working with CARPC to reduce the threat of flooding. And so it has now been incorporated into our sustainability plan, and hearing you present the plan tonight helps us really think about how to get through how to start implementing elements of this. So I really appreciate your presentation tonight, and know that because this is part of our sustainability plan, because we've been able to hear your presentation tonight, we can now be kind of thinking forward, you know, how do we push forward adoption of the infrastructure plan with the village at the village board level, and then also how can we, you know, what can we be doing to push permeable surfaces. It looks like that was one of the highest. There was like a list of 5, and that was, you know, in order of efficiency or effectiveness, that was one of the highest. So it allows us to kind of think through some of those things. So just for time purposes, I'm going to have to wrap us up here, and I'm going to let you go. And if folks have other questions, can they reach out to you directly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks for having me tonight. I hope this is just the start of many conversations we'll have about green infrastructure and Cross Plains and the watershed as a whole.
Absolutely.
Put a link to the website in the chat if you want to check out more, and we'll definitely be in touch. And thanks again.
Thanks,
all right,
Mike.
thank you again,
Thank you,
Mike. Great presentation. Thanks so much for your time.
Really
Bye.
appreciate it.
All right, sorry to hurry us along. I think every one of these topics could probably take over an hour. So I know that that felt short, and we could dive into each one of these for longer periods of time, but I'm going to keep us moving here. So the next item for tonight, and again, this is another one where I'm going to try to, it's going to feel way too short, but we're going to at least start on this conversation about research needs for the new Village Hall / police building. So to refresh your memory, on our last meeting, we decided that we would push for LEED certification for this new Village Hall / police building. And Andy Hartman wrote a memo to Jay, and Jay's response was fairly in the affirmative, is what I would say. He wasn't, he didn't disagree, but he would like our committee to do some additional research. And so to give some more guidance on what level of certification. So there are different levels. There's platinum and gold and silver. And so he's asked us to do a little bit more research to make some recommendations, and then to see to the extent possible to come up with some estimated costs for LEED certification. And so with that, we have some research to do. And first, I just want to pause there and see if folks have any questions or comments or reflections on that conversation to date.
I think one important addition to that was his request, essentially sort of the cost benefit of being LEED versus being LEED-like, I think. And so just wanted to throw that in there, not that we could not research that as well. It sounds like his questions, I don't want to jump to solutions yet, but I guess I will. The questions that he asked seemed to me to be the kind of introductory discussion that you might have with a consultant, sort of your free 1 hour. Hey, why do you want to work with me kind of thing? What would this do for you? My sense was that was kind of the gist of those body of questions that Jay was asking about. So I don't know what others thought.
Well, I have a weird input into this, in that now that I am newly on the Lions board for all practical purposes after 2 meetings, apparently at the last board meeting of the Lions, Jay arrived. He was invited. He asked to be invited, and his request of the Lions was to write a letter saying, this is why the Lions of Cross Plains supports the new Village Hall and police building. And what he told them was that he's going to do this as cheaply as possible, and he will do it so there's no impact on the taxpayers. And he doesn't want to do any of these. If Mrs. Barman can be kind of, she paraphrased, we're not going to do any of these fancy newfangled things. And so I was actually sitting there listening to this, and I'm going, it feels like Jay is just trying to play the room right now. He's going to a group of kind of a conservative leaning Chamber of Commerce mini almost group and saying, I'm going to do this inexpensively, and it's just going to be a village hall and a police station and nothing special. He's coming to us and he's saying, I want all of these newfangled things. I just don't want to have to pay for them. I don't have to pay for the certification. And I'm confused. That's where I hearing 2 different conversations with him, I'm flat out confused. Because number one, that I don't even know how you figure out what LEED-like is. It's not like we can go to the US Green Building Council and say, for free, give us all your information. I mean, that's why they exist. They're not gonna do that. So my take on it is, I don't know, maybe we reach out to a LEED certified architect and we say, for a building of roughly this square footage in Cross Plains that wants to be, you know, gold, silver, or platinum, what is the kind of cost involved in that above and beyond just designing the building? And be done with it.
Yeah,
That's my take on it.
John, I think, you know, I think Jay's, his intentions are, and he did a project, he did the Midtown Police Station in Madison, and they were a LEED certified building. And I think inherently what Jay found was there are a lot of cost increases associated with LEED because there's specialized skills that you're going and seeking out when you're talking about architects and engineers. They're incorporating a lot of these components into the building process, and a lot of these are specialized components, and there are increased associated costs with that. And I think what he found, you know, is that there, with all these different levels, after the LEED certification's achieved, you'll, you know, receive a plaque on the wall. And I don't know that he necessarily thinks, is the plaque on the wall, does it need to be the one that we went for in Madison, or can it be a different level? The one that he went for and was asked to achieve in Madison, I think, increased the costs much higher than what he deemed appropriate and for the project scope. And I think in Jay's situation here, he's trying to be a good steward of the taxpayer dollars and making sure that, you know, we get a good product and a good final product. But I think his thoughts are that some of these things can be figured out or done with a little bit of research as to just, well, what do we really want to achieve? Where I think maybe Madison was more dictated from above, if that's right. And so he's just trying to find out, where in the middle ground are we wanting to be, where we can get this done to a level that's satisfactory to everybody, but maybe isn't gonna burden the taxpayers, you know, much greater than what is needed to deliver this.
My thoughts on this is this is where it becomes hard, because I truly believe that you know, all of the different, and I'll just use the word technology because that's kind of what it is, you know, whether you think about passive solar or solar itself or geothermal, or I mean there's lots and lots and lots of different technologies that can be put in place that probably, likely, I'm almost sure, because I put some of them in my house, have a higher upfront cost. But then downstream, it's lower operating costs. Or, yeah, I mean, that's actually what we found. So I'm going to go with that. But that requires those engineers and those architects to do. I mean, I'm going to give my sister a couple props as an engineer. There's a reason why she got a degree in engineering and can speak to certain things where I'm an accountant and I can't.
So here's what I'm going to recommend, because what I'm hearing, John, is that, you know, you're feeling like the folks on the sustainability committee don't have the expertise that we would need to say what would be LEED compliant. And Steve, what I heard you say earlier is maybe it's worth arranging a phone call to somebody for, you know, often there is sort of a free half an hour, you know, introductory conversation to figure out if it's even a right fit to work with a consultant. And so I'm going to make a recommendation that what we do as a first step, and maybe it's the only step that we take to try to get to this question these questions that Jay's asking, is we reach out to somebody who is certified with the Sustainable Buildings Council and find a time to have a conversation with him or her and get a sense about what it would entail. What does LEED certification entail? And I think that we'd have a really hard time talking about what would be LEED compliant, but we can at least start to list out what would potential costs be for LEED certification and what are the benefits. And we can start there. I think, you know, sometimes you answer the question you wish you had been asked instead of the question that you were asked. And I think in this case, we should try to find a little bit more information about what are the costs and benefits of being LEED certified. And then, you know, I'm also not an engineer, and I couldn't model the long-term cost savings and also model, like, you know, electricity rates for the next 15 years and all the other things that they'd probably need to help us figure out what the total costs are. But I think we could start with doing a little bit of research to talk to somebody who can give us more information on LEED certification. So that's my recommendation as a first step.
Sounds like a good plan. The only one thing I was just thinking about is if we reach out to a LEED certified person, group, consultancy, and ask them if we need to be LEED certified, like asking the barber if you need a haircut,
right?
Situation, but it's probably at least going to give us some pretty good initial data, I would think, that we could weigh or take with a grain of salt.
Yep, it would be a starting point.
I understand what you're saying, Steve, but at the same time, I don't even know while the concept seems rather simple to say we want to be LEED compliant without going through the certification process, we don't know what that means.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's why I'm saying, John, that we might not, let's answer the question we wish we had been asked rather than the question that we are being asked, because I can't chase down what it means to be LEED compliant. I mean, we don't even know exactly what's entailed with being LEED certified. So let's start with LEED certified and see what information that gets us.
There are a couple architecture firms in the Madison area that right on their website say they are LEED accredited professionals. Mm-hmm. So
John, how about this? Would you be willing to reach out to two places and ask for a phone call? And I'd be happy to join if you can get one of those phone calls nailed down.
Sure.
Okay.
I will do that.
Okay. Then I think that's where we are. You know, I think that's a perfectly fine starting place. None of us have LEED certification credentials. None of us know what LEED compliant would mean, but let's take the first step of having a conversation with somebody who is credentialed, and we'll see how far down the field we can get. Anything else on that item before I move us on? All right, great. Michael, I'm going to bring you on to talk a little bit about some updated recommendations around the lighting ordinance. Again, I'm going to try to keep this conversation to 10 minutes, which I know is not enough time, but we've got a lot of other things to talk about. So I'm going to give you the floor. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to give you the floor now.
Okay. Hey, all. Yeah, I'm going to be quick. I've been thinking about what I'm going to say. So since our last meeting, pretty much Madison updated their light ordinance. They did an update and they reduced in unshielded fixtures, bringing it down to a 500 lumen level. I know this is really technical. 500 lumens is like equivalent of like a 45 watt incandescent bulb. Whereas our ordinance used to say 100 watt incandescent bulb. They brought it down. So that I brought ours down from 15 to 12 and they brought it down to 500. I'm like, wow, that's a great thing to say. Ours can be 500 if Madison did it, as an example. So that's what I had in there, like the 500, 1200, because just like as an option thing. And Madison had this weird thing about 5 feet at the property line if you can't see the light. I'm just like, that's just confusing things. Like, it just is confusing things. So that was in there just as what they do, what they're doing. Other thing that I found really interesting. Now I put Verona's in there because it's very short and very sweet. And I always wondered, like, if that meant that it was very, if it carried a lot of weight or if it didn't. But so I went back and reread it, and Verona is just like, light sources shall be full cutoff fixtures with the source fully shielded and directed downwards. That's it. They just go, everything has to be full cutoff. That is a very powerful line. That means, like, there is no exemption for 400 watt lumens even. There is no exemption for 100 watt incandescents. I mean, they really went at it, is what I'm saying. And so I kind of started to go out and like read other places, ordinances like Madison's after that. And, you know, you can get into all these weird things and it just gets confusing. And I do not want to do confusing because it then becomes confusing. So the other thing that I did that was very interesting is that I went and borrowed the village's light meter. Well, interesting for me at least, but it was how's that? You know, maybe not everybody wants to ride their bike around the village and pull out this thing and have it face houses, but maybe that's just me.
No,
But
that's fine. You be you.
thanks, John. So what I figured out is, so this is even what I did. In the house, we have these 2 light fixtures on the front next to the garage. I even went so far to put the 45 equivalents in them, the 60, the 75s, the 100 like LED equivalents, and even the 100 LED equivalents with the 5,000 K bulbs in them, and started at the street and walked up every chunk of concrete and got the reading at 5 different levels just to see how the meter reacted to all these different brightnesses of lights. And at street level, it was like the 400 was 0.06 and the 1500 5K one was 0.19. So, I mean, and this is like, you know, 0.06 of a foot candle. This is not a lot of light. John, I did try to load a light meter on the phone, and I was dealing with,
It didn't work.
It was, I think that the light levels were so low that it just wasn't designed to read light levels like at these levels that like I'm trying to read.
Okay.
Whereas the one that Bill Chang, like, I think that thing was between $100 and $200, and it can like, I mean like
works.
as I'm walking up like each one of the chunks of concrete, like it's giving me, you know, 0.1, 0.13, 0.2, 0.37, like it's easily picking up like these small little deviations. So it was interesting, but very rarely did one of these break the 0.05 till I was the second chunk of concrete back. So at street level, normal lights like that won't break the 0.05, but they can really still cause a lot of light, especially if they're the 5,000 K ones, cause nuisances, etc. So that was an interesting thing. Other interesting thing though was that a lot of these security lights that go off that are the 2 lights on them that are like motion activated at street level, they will exceed the 0.05. Like I was out there doing that and like somebody drove by the neighbors and hers went off. So I like ran over there and standing at the end of the driveway and I'm like measuring it. So it was just interesting things like that. At least to me. So to sum it, and then other things that were strange were like our 0.05 is like limit is like it says at the property line. It gets really weird, like in case this ever was going to be enforced, because the property line becomes this whole question, which I actually started thinking about. And then when I read Middleton's ordinance, they actually specifically talked about it. And then there was even another ordinance from Arizona, because I've also done some ordinance like comparisons. And like Middleton says it has to be at the ground level horizontal. because it's crazy. If you're sitting with this light meter and you have it at the ground level horizontal, and you just even twitch it and have it face toward where the light is coming from, it can go from 0.3 to 0.65 just by a rotation. And so it gets into weird enforcement issues, whereas this other one says held at the property line in any configuration, like the meter. I mean, it's just because you could tell that somebody must have been like had issues with enforcement, so they made corrections. So these are the issues that I'm working through and that I'm thinking about in terms of this. I still haven't heard back from the updated draft of the Tucson. He said it would be done at the end of July. I was thinking about sending him an email. I don't want to be annoying, but it passed the deadline just to get a update on it, you know, because that might, who knows? They have, like you were talking about subcommittees, they have a whole entire lighting committee out there that even has a subcommittee inside of the lighting committee. I'm serious.
What do they do?
It's, I mean, they bring in builders, like builders, so that the building code, so that the builders are like, yeah, we can get fixtures like that and stuff. That's what I think it is. And then they have the guys from the astronomical observation thing saying, we want this. And then you have, I think, some of the business folks that like get involved. Yeah, you know. So I don't want a subcommittee. All I might ask for, though, is that, Steve, I know you've kind of, well, like, I think you think this is a good idea. And sometimes when I'm working on something in my head, if I just had somebody to email and be like, what do you think about this? It would just help me like move along. And that would be all that I'd ask of you. It wouldn't be a lot of emails, but it would just help me, because then it's just, because otherwise I'm just doing it all in my brain and writing stuff down.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd be glad to be the sounding board or the.
Yeah, like if it's, you know, no, that's just excessive, or that's not enough kind of thing. You get what I'm saying?
Sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that's what I got. How's that?
Strong work,
Michael,
Michael.
that was amazing. 8 minutes. I was going to give you 10. You took 8. Amazing. And that means another minute or two if folks have questions, or if there's anything that you want feedback on right now. We've got a little bit of time. This looks great. I do have a question. What does full cutoff mean again?
Okay, full cut. See, full cutoff is stronger than shielded. A lot of times shielded means no light goes above the horizon. Full cutoff also means no light goes above the horizon, but it means that first like 10 degrees of drop down, there can't be more than 10% of the light coming out. Because it basically means you're really trying to push it down. It's just a subtle thing. It's a definition created by the lighting association, but reading these ordinances and you're reading like definitions, I'm like, oh, there's a subtle difference. A lot of times most people will read them the same, but because they're pretty close to the same. But full cutoff means that the light really, you're really trying to hide the light underneath is what it's meaning. Because sometimes, like, if you look at a light, if you're looking at it horizontal and it's like, man, you can really see it coming and hitting you, that's not full cutoff. Full cutoff has a little bit more of an edge on it. It's a very subtle thing, whether or not it would ever be a reason for enforcement, but I decided to put the one that was a little bit more hefty. And so that's why I'm trying to take out all references to shielded in our ordinance, and everything has to be full cutoff, because that's what I think Verona says, right?
I thought
Yeah,
that's
full
what,
cutoff,
yeah, I thought that's
yeah.
where it came from.
It says
when
full
you
cutoff
mentioned it.
fixtures. And that's kind of maybe even where I read that, I was like, wow, like they really like are, oh, okay. Are there any, hey, we were talking about the green infrastructure stuff with Mike. Can I talk about that real quick for like a minute if I have 1 minute left?
You have 30 seconds, go.
Okay, so you know Brewery Road is being redone. Nothing has been talked about green infrastructure on that road, and I don't know if it's too far along to jimmy that into it, because there's a meeting on August 17th. If some of you folks want to send an email to me, I need them by when is it? I don't know when the deadline is. It's, I think is that this Friday? It's this, oh yeah, because I don't know. I forget. There's some deadline. If you send me an email anyway,
I'm so glad, yes.
And if you send me an email and it doesn't get into the packet for that meeting, every email that I get and afterwards, because I want to put in a packet that's going to go to the village board for their August 24th meeting, just informational. We had a meeting. These are the emails that we got, kind of thing. But it would definitely be something to be talked about, because I know with regard to sidewalks and probably like the way the surface of the road is going to be contorted is could possibly be decided at the September village board meeting, but most likely it's going to be the October one. Like, that's like the engineer said, that's when they need to know so they can have everything done to go out for bid January 1st. They need those 2 months to get the drawings done. So what I didn't say is that, like Bill Chang, a long time ago, we were talking about this before he left, Madison has been doing pilot programs with permeable surfaces on like certain streets in Madison. And I actually drove down there and looked at these one day. Have I told you guys this or no?
No.
No.
Mm-mm.
I went down there and looked at these things, and basically it was like, it wasn't the whole road. It was basically like the apron, like where you'd park a car on the side, or kind of like the path, like they didn't permeable surface the whole thing, but they definitely had 2 different types of pavers, like bricks there, I think, to see just how they would hold up to cars being parked on them and like it raining. But what I found also interesting was that in the terrace between the street and the sidewalk, they had these little bump ins, like the curb would be ground down, and they actually had dug the terrace out, so there were like these little ponds where water would fill to cause infiltration, so not all the water went down and got into the storm sewer. We were basically trying to catch it in these, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like, you get what I'm saying? Like, it was basically these
Yeah.
little catch areas that didn't have a sewer under them, but it was to cause. Now, I could ask about some of that stuff at the 17th meeting, like to the village engineer and to, you know, Jerry Gray, like what their feelings are towards that, or not toward that, like being something totally different. But in terms of using like a permeable surface on brewery, I see that was kind of a question I wanted to ask Mike Rupiper, like if other people have done it and have they figured out how much they hold up? Because I would be fearful that if you put one of those on brewery and it sees the traffic that it does, that in 5 years, it's just a bunch of pavers going 400 different directions. See, that's why I think Madison was doing that trial run, because they want to see how well they worked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can still send him an email. It was the one
Yeah.
question that I kind of had.
Yeah. I don't know about that, but I'm glad that you, so yeah, Michael, please feel free to follow up and ask that question, because that would be good to know ahead of the August 17th meeting. But I'm really glad that you flagged that hasn't been brought up yet in the comments. And
No, there hasn't been. It's all sidewalk or no sidewalk is pretty much the emails that I get, basically. And,
okay.
you know, and yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
So
Okay.
are you coming down on the big sidewalk? Or are you coming down on
Well, I did have a resident tell me that if they put a sidewalk in on Brewery Road, he was going to shoot me with a high-powered rifle. So
What?
so that's not a positive comment.
it's not a positive. I think it was meant half in jest, but you know, there's always a little truth in a jest.
Wow.
You think.
I did not think that sidewalks were that controversial.
Well,
Wow.
pretty much what the consensus is of how I'm reading is that the residents who live there are kind of not in favor, and everyone else who doesn't is kind of the way it's working. My wife and I walk over there all the time, and a sidewalk would be great. You know, we live on Continental or something, you know. I mean, it's kind of like Gill's Way. We love walking over there. It'd be great if there's a sidewalk. I'm like, you know, just a generalization, not talking specifically about who mailed it, but it just sort of seemed like that was the flow of the although I did get an email from a fellow who lives in the town of Barry, because I went up there and he was actually in favor, and it would be in front of his house, I believe. So not entirely, you know, but that's the general thinking right now.
All right.
I don't know. So I don't know if I'm in favor or not. It's really going to be this meeting, and then, you know, whenever the village board does their final one, might be well attended or not. I mean, I don't know. And at the 17th, they're going to have surface drawings of possible sidewalk configuration. So it's not just sketches. It's actually going to be like, this is how the road might look, which that might inspire people to voice their opinion.
I'm going to move us back. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to move us back to our agenda, and I think we've just wrapped up the lighting ordinance. So I'm going to move us on. But do not forget, if you want to give a boost to green infrastructure, you've got a great opportunity with the update to Brewery Road, and you have an opportunity to get those comments to Michael ahead of the August 17th meeting. So thanks, Michael, for that, and thanks for your research on lighting ordinances, and Steve for being a thought partner to Michael as we work through some updated ordinances around that. Our next topic, and we're low on time, so I'm going to make a recommendation that we scoot through some of these and then table some of them. So Brian, could you talk, this next item is sustainability grants, and I think that this is actually specific to the composting grant that is an opportunity, a federal grant. Is that right?
Yeah, so a couple of sessions or meetings back, we had brought up the topic of possibly looking to our village planner and her firm to assist the village in targeting or applying and writing grants on the committee's behalf to kind of spearhead and get some projects started. So Sonia, and kudos to her, caught wind of this one that is going to be closing relatively soon. It's a federal grant. Again, the complication with this one is the tight time frame in which you would have to get an application in, and there's also tie-ins to this being more of a village initiative if adopted, less so just a sustainability smaller side project. But I guess this was a general example of something that could be looked at as a future opportunity for the village to potentially look to apply for if and when these become available. Again, I think the main discussion point, what I was hoping for tonight was whether anyone had an opportunity to look at it in all seriousness to see if it is something that would be beneficial to possibly pursue. I could ask the village board at the next meeting to add that, or ask Jay to add that to the agenda for discussion at the next village board meeting. Given the timeframes involved, unfortunately, we'd only have one chance to do this, and it would be at the next meeting. But again, this is more of a general example of the types of, programs that are out there with sustainability in mind. And maybe this just could be a conversation starter for, if I come across any of these, how would you like me to bring these to your attention going forward as well?
Brian, starting that conversation via email, I think, like you did, was probably the best way to do it. And I'm wondering about, even if I think the timeline for this one, we might have just, I think my guess is we just won't be able to take advantage of this opportunity, because if the next board meeting is the 22nd, and I think the deadline is September 1st for this, right? And these grants usually take several weeks to pull together. I don't know that it would be really possible to move on something that quickly. And that's always the tough thing with I think this is I can't remember, EPA, which agency?
This one, I'm USDA, I believe.
USDA. Okay. They issue them with such tight turnarounds. So I don't know what the best system is, but I feel like you flagging it via email, and then, we're bringing it up on the next call, and hopefully we would have some time in the future to talk about it. But I think this one, there's probably just, I don't think this one is in the cards unless there's something that I'm not seeing, and you think that our planners might, do they have federal grant writing expertise such that they could turn it around in a week? What's your sense of that?
Yeah, so the complication with this is that any of these grant proposals would come with a fee, but it's not something that's associated with the contract that the village currently has with the planner. So there would be an additional fee to write any of these. So that I guess that in theory was just, on the, I get these and it might be the 11th hour that I'm getting wind of one of these opportunities. Do you want me to send these over to you? I'm still gonna request and speak to the possibilities of seeing if there's any budget money in this new budget cycle that can be secured for the committee to potentially pursue a grant opportunity or two, when you've identified which ones you'd like to make your focal point, if that money can be secured through this budget process. But in the future, if it cannot, is this still worth me bringing this to your attention? Would a committee member or two have the time to potentially put together a grant? You know, some of these, I can assure you, I'm not going to have the time to do all of these. I might be able to put a few together, but I think some of these, especially first, I need to know, are you guys on board? Is this something you do want, you know, an effort put forth to apply for or try to secure? And then from there, who do we want to, you know, utilize to help write it?
So the first question is the specific opportunity, right?
Correct.
Yep. And so just for a reminder, John and Steve, this would speak to our priority number 19 in our
Yeah.
sustainability plan around implementing a village-wide food compost collection service. And so just wanted to make sure you knew that.
So doing it kind of in order of the questions, and I will just respond for me personally. I'm not speaking for the committee at all. I would be interested in this, the composting, very much so. I don't know if it's possible with the time frame. Overall, I'm very interested in having any of these brought to our attention. I think that is what we're all about. And I would like to know about them. And then I'm just going to say this, in 5.5 weeks, I'm going to have time on my hands. I've never written a grant before in my life, but I'm willing to learn.
Yeah. So, and Brian, I'd concur. As you come across these, share them with us. We may not act, we may not be able to act, but we might be able to. And there are, in addition to, you know, federal agencies having a lot more money to distribute, and now with the Inflation Reduction Act, that could potentially increase, you know, a lot more.
Yeah.
In addition to federal agencies releasing funds, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations that have now also been funded to help municipal, you know, to help local governments and committees like ours write these grants. And so I think that, you know, we're going to have to do some work to find some matchmaking, but like Slipstream, you know, there are organizations throughout the state that are being funded to help with that technical assistance piece. And so if we can find them, especially, you know, it's going to be issue specific, but we won't always necessarily have to rely on our planners to do this, because we may be able to partner with nonprofit organizations who have been funded or are already working on a grant proposal and are looking for local communities to include in that proposal. So just keep sharing them with us, and the wider we cast the net, the more likely it is that we'll be able to take advantage of the opportunities.
Sounds like a plan.
I'm going to move us on, and let's see. So we've got maybe one and a half more items. Yep.
This is almost done.
Oh,
Oops, sorry.
Michael. Okay.
I'm talking to my mom over here. I'm sorry. Should have muted myself. Sorry.
All right. So our next item is the NOMO May briefing, and John, you're slated to make that presentation on August 22nd, and we really just wanted to include this item tonight to see if you needed any other help. I don't feel like you need to give the presentation at all, but we wanted to make sure that if you needed help or if you needed anything to help you prepare, that you had some time to talk about that. Do you feel like you need any help?
I do not believe I do. I put out a draft earlier today. Steve already did some corrections, you know, because I missed something. Yeah, I missed. And so I put that correction in. I actually believe I'm done with the presentation.
Okay,
Yeah, you have a link to it now. It's on one of my Google Drives. Steve has a link to it. I wasn't sure who else was going to be on the meeting today. Because I was, and I don't have Andy's contact information. I was pretty sure Mike or Kevin was not going to be here. So I just sent it to you two guys.
okay.
But I
Well,
believe I'm done.
okay, well, good. So I'll take a look at that and let you know if I have any feedback. But I trust that Steve, if Steve's taken a look at that, and Steve, you did a lot of the research and helped get that whole effort off the ground. So I trust that Steve's given you some good feedback. So I'm gonna try to tune into that village board meeting on the 22nd, and I know Michael will be there, and Kevin will be there, and Andy will be there. So most of the sustainability committee and the folks who have been part of that process will be tuned in and can offer, you know, if there's
Yeah.
any discussion, we can support anything you have to say.
Yep.
But let us know if there's anything else you need on that.
I would really just like you to review what I wrote and just make sure that I kind of hit on it. I didn't want to be very extremely verbose, just because I don't want to bore everybody. But I wanted to hit the highlights, and I did. What I did is I talked about science, I talked about community acceptance, and then I talked about what I called was unanticipated mentions in the news and things like that, and what they were all about, and how they kind of highlighted Cross Plains. Excuse me.
Cool.
I do have one question. That village board meeting is going to be in person, I believe.
Correct, John. It'll be in person or Zoom attendance. So I was going to just add, if there's a document or a PowerPoint, I don't know what you were referring to as far as what you were preparing. If you want to
I
get
will send it to you.
Yeah, perfect. Get it to me next week sometime before the end of the week, and I'll add it to the packet of materials that gets sent.
I am very likely I will show up to that meeting in person, because while I'm fine in a committee meeting and Zoom meetings and stuff like that, I hate making presentations where I can't actually see people's faces.
Gotcha.
Great. Okay. Thanks, John. And again, I'll take a look at that, but let us know if there's anything else you need on that.
Okay.
I'm going to move us on to our next item, which is discussion of sustainability plan implementation, and just recognizing that we've already talked about items or priorities 3, 4, and 5 tonight, and also potentially item 19. So I feel like we've got that pretty well covered, and this is really a standing agenda item, so that we're always talking about how to move that sustainability plan forward. And so I feel like this one's in a pretty good place. I am curious though, because we've covered items 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, and 5. Brian, can you let us know, did the board make a final approval of the updated chicken or domestic fowl ordinance as recommended by the sustainability committee? And as you know, where did that land with plan commission moving to village?
Yeah, that we had the public hearing and the ordinance modifications passed at the last, I believe it was last village board meeting. So those are going to be added to the ordinances in a new modified adopted forms. And that was to, again, just to recap, allow up to a combination of 6 chickens or ducks within the village. Modifying the only chickens permissions previously.
And it also allowed for domestic fowl to be kept beyond owner occupied housing, right? Renters with permission of the property owner can also, okay. And so that in many ways, that's we've moved forward with our recommendation or recommended action of number 2 in our sustainability plan. So a lot of progress, a lot of things are moving forward. Okay, thanks, Brian. Thanks for that update.
Mhm.
So I'm going to move us on to our last item on the agenda, which is the discussion on possible changing our monthly sustainability meeting dates. And I'm going to make a recommendation that we consider moving our monthly meetings from Tuesday to the second Tuesday to the second Wednesday of the month. And I have reached out to, I think, nearly everybody. I have not heard from Kevin about whether that time would work for him, but I remember seeing in his email that he does have a pretty regularly occurring conflict for Tuesday nights. But I do know that Wednesday nights would work for Andy, and Steve and John, I believe that would work for you as well. So just want to give some time for discussion, reflection, questions about that recommendation.
Works for Steve.
Okay. Do we need a motion on this one, or does it need to be on the agenda longer than it? We can actually take action on that, right, Ryan?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
I was
And
just
I'll
gonna
even-
ask real quick, does this conflict with you, Brian?
No, I should be able to make this work. Actually, it won't have too much of a impact. The only thing would be the publishing of the notice dates and such. I suppose I could push it back to Monday then, and still meet the deadlines, since I've been trying to put it out before the end of the week prior, just in the event there's any conflicts on the schedule for me on Monday, but this might open the door that I can get it published on Mondays. So yeah, it should work.
And then it won't conflict with election night ever.
This is true, but thankfully I'm not actively involved firsthand in that. So in fairness and full
Good.
disclosure, I'm a little bit removed from that one personally.
Oh,
at
good.
the moment.
Okay. All right. Great. Well,
This
oh.
is Michael. I'm here so often. It works for me too.
oh, good. That's awesome. Okay, great. Well, then I would take a motion to move our monthly sustainability committee meetings to the second Wednesday of every month, beginning in September.
I will make that motion to move our monthly sustainability committee meetings to the second Wednesday of each month, starting in September.
Great. Is there a second?
Steve will second that motion.
All right. Any more discussion? Okay.
Steve does have a conflict next month, but I wouldn't have
Okay.
made, but I would not have made the Tuesday one either. I'm gone that entire week. So
Okay.
it should not affect moving forward.
All right. Great. All right. Thanks, Steve. Any more discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? That should be nobody here. Okay.
So that
Motion
will be the
carries.
14th.
So that would be the 14th. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm here. Never mind.
You will be here, Steve? Okay.
I will. Yep. I'm
Okay.
gone the prior week.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we got got through a lot tonight, and so I appreciate that you showed up. Good discussion. Sorry that we had to shorten all of the conversations, but they were really good. And you know who you can follow up with. You can follow up with Mike Rupiper if you've got questions around the green infrastructure plan. You can follow up with Michael if you've got questions around lighting or the Brewery Creek green infrastructure comments. And you can follow up with any of us if you've got great ideas around sustainability grants that can help pay for our actions within our sustainability plan. And we've got John on deck to present next at the village board meeting on August 22nd. So follow up with him if you want anything, if you want to make sure that anything gets included in that. And that brings us to a close. So with that, I would take a motion to adjourn at 7:27.
Steve will make a motion to adjourn.
All
I
right.
will second it.
All right. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thanks, everybody. If you haven't gone already, go vote
Go vote.
and go vote. And have a great rest of your night, everybody. Thank
Okay.
you so much. All right.
Talk to you
Good night,
later.
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.